Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Moving Forward Tonight. It is one that will simply put the boot into the asses of some of the United Records of the Poor, more so the echelon of the party, and that is where it deserves to be. They seem now to be singing the signature tune, WTF, something which their leader heard in a debate somewhere in America, and its meaning was basically, where are the funds? And now they're using it to ask Labour that question, when, while they were in power, they made it clear that they did not have to give any account of how much money was spent. That was the impression that many of the country had, in that they were not answerable to no one. They almost made it look as if it was not the opposition's business. Now it looks as if they have changed their way of thinking in order to cast aspersions on the government with lies and innuendos. So I now say to them, where the FU is the money you borrowed and yet told us that the country was broke or it did not have any money? Where also is the WTF, where we say where the F and the endings is CK? Is our CBI monies that took T.O.R. King, that is now in his bank account in China? Is it a Hong Kong bank or a Chinese bank? Because Mr. Martinez, your spokesperson, a crook who has spent time in prison, both in the US and in France, he seemed to know so much because he was adamant that it was in a Chinese bank. The leader of the opposition said that he never spoke to Mr. Martinez, yet he gave the Alan Shastney government a clean bill of health in terms of the CPI. How did he get his information? From the lawyer to Alan, who was also the lawyer to Galaxy at the time, who later sacked him? How was Martinez privy to what he had? Because he has never been to St. Lucia to have sat with the government and then to discuss CIP. It is clear that in the interview he had with Lisa, there were questions he did not want to answer and got very upset and angry about these questions. And his dementia was also like a madman. There was an arrogance in his mannerisms, without a doubt. Come on, Alan. Stop playing childish games. You remember that as a little boy, it was alleged that your father bought cricket gears for you, and you went playing, but always wanted to bat first. And as soon as you got out, word had it that you would take your bats and balls and wicket and walk away. Is that true? That you were a little bully, as alleged? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I literally want to put the boot into the asses of some of the United Records of the Poor, more so in their backsides, starting from their leader, whom I can only describe as abominable and without a doubt an abomination to this country. The first word, abominable, means a detestable and very bad. And the second is someone or something that is detestable. I don't use these words lightly, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm left with no alternative. When you are dealing with characters led by the present leader of the opposition, when this individual speaks, I see nothing of him that is St. Lucian. He seems hell-bent on selling this country to the highest bidder, provided he gets his cut, I would think. That is my view. Because when I heard this guy in the House standing on a point of order, dealing with the land sold to T.O.R. King and the DSH racetrack, which would not have belonged to St. Lucia, then I'm convinced more and more that this guy does not care about the country. What seemed to get up his nose is the candor of Philip Joseph Pierre. And those who are not aware what the word means, it is honesty and straightforwardness. Some may call Allen a gage. Didn't he have a lady with him that does things because of his demeanor? C'est ça, moi tan. Ladies and gentlemen, when Philip and his Unity Party were elected, I thought that there and then that here was a lion of a leader who will fight for the forgotten poor men and women that were under Allen, who were seen as mere mendicants, jackasses, and barking dogs. This leader allowed that. He showed that he had no respect for those who had, as a leader, that he showed no respect. It was without a doubt that he was callous and the lowest form of speaking denominator, so to speak. My people of St. Lucia, when Philip was given in his first speech as a leader, I tell you this, with all honesty, that the dark clouds that hovered over this 238 square miles of the country began to lift literally from the skies of St. Lucia. And almost every heart in the country, the country's pain that was there, and the anguish suddenly disappeared because even those who were strong UWP inside felt relieved that Allen, was gone as their leader. But he managed to come back somehow. However, they did not realize that this individual had become so besotted with power that he was prepared to do anything to get that leadership. And even within the party, it was allegedly said that he bought some who would stand by him for a prize. So the story and rumors were put out in the public domain. When Philip made his first speech, although a little detailed program was not spelled out, all the programs were not spelled out yet, we had observed what was there before, which was virtually a collapsing government and country, it had put us now in a different state of mind. Therefore, Philip had to put his head and his government into a fast-flowing mode, so much so that between now and Christmas, we will see and hear of the employment that will be created. Oh, Christmas and New Year 2024-2025 will be a prosperous one for the citizens of the country, whether young or old. Our pensioners will be better off. The minimum wage will be in force. Oh, without a doubt, this is a working government and therefore will not have to wait 5.5 years to call an election. And if he had listened to his father, that's Allen, it would have been 6 years. Can one believe that crap? It shows you the mentality of the people we were dealing with. There is no doubt in my mind that Allen left the country bankrupt and tried to cover things up close to the election to make it look as if things were moving. Did not one of his paid political specialists made the claim that they were winning handsomely as they thought that they would be able to continue in the same old mess and cover things up as best they could? Was it not Allen that said in his term of office that within 2 years the country would be once again flourishing with development to the brink? Then we heard that it would take 10 years, just like the desilting of the dam. This guy is a liar personified to the core. He is the most dishonest leader I have come across apart from Trump, Hitler, and now Xi Jinping of China. We must never forget, as we enter our third year with Philip at the helm, that we were told years before that the country was bankrupt, and later that it did not have money. So Philip was taking on a country that was virtually collapsing. I don't want any St. Lucians to forget that. Even those who supported the United Wreckers of the Poor. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, there is no doubt that Allen left the country bankrupt. Because nowhere in the world would one-hair leader of a state say that his country was broke or did not have money. This is without a doubt unprecedented. And today, listening to the nincompoop criticizing this government on everything they did not do, more so when it is unmerited and grossly untrue. This shows the caliber of the opposition we have in the House. I've never seen an opposition behave in that manner. It is as if they never thought that losing would be a reality. Well, Philip had no alternative when he realized what he had inherited, but to stimulate the economy. And that meant to invest in great public works, feed the hungry, and to stimulate employment, to give people jobs, because they had nowhere else to turn to. What Allen and his government did not seem to understand is that people don't eat in the long run. They eat every day or starve in the long run. Philip, without a doubt, was a pragmatist due to his humble beginning and background. This made him so. He had an instructive sense of the common good and was always concerned with the fair society. So he was well grounded in the art of leading and caring for his fellow men and women. Ladies and gentlemen, at the last sitting of the House, I was simply speechless, to the extent I thought that I was waking up from a dream as to what I was hearing, when a member of the opposition in the House was not alluding to facts, but fiction or blatant lies. Ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, I will come back and we will pray. So hold the line. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. O Father in heaven, we come to you tonight to ask you to forgive us and all those who are truly sincere in what they say and do. Father, we pray to you tonight because you are without a doubt our Savior, because you gave us all a brain to be used wisely. Yes, some of us are born with defects, but you, I am sure, have taken that on board, because it is a sign to us that we are not all perfect except you. We thank you, Father, for sending Philip Joseph Pierre as our Prime Minister. And he has shown that your faith and trust in him is warranted. You choosing him to lead St. Lucia out of the darkness and into the light. We thank you, Father, and glorify you, because you are without a doubt the Prince of Peace, the King of Kings, and the Lord of Lords. Amen. Tonight I quote from the Bible, Sirach chapter 10, verses 17 to 20, and 1 to 5. A skilled craftsman is admired for the things he makes, and a leader's wisdom is proved by his words. Someone who speaks rashly and recklessly is feared and hated by everyone in town. A wise ruler will educate his people, and his government will be orderly. All the officials and all the citizens will be like their ruler. An uneducated king will ruin his people, but a government will grow strong if the rulers are wise. The Lord sees to the government of the world and brings the right person to power at the right time. The success of that person is in the Lord's hands. The Lord is the source of the honor given to any official. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. In the debate in the House, the last sitting of the House, the leader of the opposition made it clear on a point of order that no 1,000 acres was leased to DSH. Allen in the House suddenly said, out of the blue, and it is nearly 5 years now that we're in, and it's only now we are finding out, according to him, that only 180 acres was leased for the horse racing track to DSH. All other lands, ladies and gentlemen, listen, were sold to T.O.R. King at a cost of $60,000 US an acre. What I want to know is, where is that money? WTF? Allen even said that the horses that cost $112 million was bought by T.O.R. King with his own monies. This one needs to be investigated. And a bill of sale has to be produced by Allen and his past government. The present government must get to the bottom of this. I tell them this. Did he also pay for the incinerators that cost us so much money but never worked? And the $13 million that he paid for a road for T.O.R. King? Also, did he pay for the transportation of garbage to Dayglow? Allen has to answer all these questions, because sooner or later, after telling us how much they had to spend on Ojo Labs, he will suddenly tell us it was Ojo Lab who paid that money to workers. This individual changes his tune as it suits him, and therefore should not be in our politics. What does upset me is that the idiot who is the PR of the United Records of the Poor is asking, where is the money? Where the money gone? Stupidity. It shows how petty they are when they know full well that MSR Martinez and Allen made it clear that T.O.R. King CIP monies is in the bank in China. St. Lucians, we have to say to Allen, enough is enough. And as the Prime Minister made clear that he should return, I didn't say it, to the country he's a product of. Because he told us that. He didn't know how to answer that in the House. Allen, I tell you this in all sincerity, that the country cannot take it anymore with your lies. You even belittled the jetty. Can you believe that? That was built for the fishermen in Micoud North, that they had been asking your government for over 5.5 years when you were in power. It would have been 6 years if you had listened to your father, who wanted you to hold the election in October. Can you believe this? When this same guy is talking about the Constitution and thereby putting the public servants on notice. Ladies and gentlemen, this leader of the opposition has no respect for the fishermen of Micoud North and also for the government dignitaries who were at the ceremony. He had the audacity to make the statement that they were going to open a toilet and not a jetty, or words to that effect. Can you believe this? This individual should have been ashamed, and after losing that constituency, the bedrock of the father of the UWP, Sir John Compton, who never lost that seat or constituency, and now for the first time, Labour at the last election won with the opposition under Allen, who, in my view, has a narcissist tendency. There is no doubt in my mind, and many others, that this character tries to give the impression that he is so sanctimonious. That was said by one or two, when in truth and in fact, he is not. He even made the statement that St. Lucia and the Philip is not a democracy, or words to that effect. While overseas, as alleged, he's making statements. As far as I'm concerned, this individual has a selfishness about him, which I mentioned earlier. He seems to be unaware that if it is not he who decides who run the country, but he must realize it's the people who run the country at the end of the day at elections. There is no doubt in my mind that the present Prime Minister must stay focused in what he and his government plans for the country's future. They must not react to the leader of the opposition's tantrums, blatant dishonesty and lies that he portrays when the vamp takes him because of his dishonesty. Ladies and gentlemen, over the last week I saw that press conference with the DPP in regards to the report that dealt with killings that took place during the Operational Restore Confidence. I am sure that during the 5.5 years of the UWP government's stint in office, some charges would have been brought if it was possible, because the DPP came into office during their first months in office or term. What I found annoying with the press conference was when a reporter continued to ask the DPP whether he had read the report. I felt this was somewhat absurd. And I would have told him that the report was one of the worst that had ever been written at that level. To the extent, the majority of what was written, I will tell him, if he hasn't read it, and I'm sure he has, it was clearly expressed as hearsay. Nevertheless, what I felt about the press conference is that even though certain police officers were named and targeted in the report, one would have to have concrete evidence to prove that the guns were planted, more so that it came from the armory. It was said that the reason why the investigators knew it was planted is because they are of the view that the guns came from the police armory. If that was so, then to convict would have to be that there was more so when there is reasonable doubt as to who were the real culprits, who planted the guns. Have you got fingerprints? What would have been important is the fingerprints on the guns. And that, I'm sure, was not forthcoming. Until then, what Operational Restore Confidence taught us is that we have to be efficient and effective in how we go about such an operation in the future. However, I still believe in certain circumstances, Operational Restore Confidence may come into effect again in the future. But it must be done correctly and effectively and efficiently. At this juncture, I want to say quite categorically that if I read the temper of our people correctly, and without a doubt I've come to the conclusion and realization that they are fed up. right now with this leader of the opposition and his band of merry men and women. And I'm sure the DPP too is fed up with him. When Alan tries to belittle our Prime Minister overseas, I want to say to you, brothers and sisters, that the trust we put into Philip's leadership will be returned by his courage and the devotion that befits him because of the love for his country. Therefore, together, we face the arduous days that lie before us in the warm courage of national unity with clear consciousness of speaking old and previous morals and values with the clean satisfaction that comes from the stern performance of duty by old and young alike. It's at this juncture I'll take my second break. Welcome back to Moving Forward. Ladies and gentlemen, the government believes in both young and old in developing this country. Their aim is the assurance of a rounded and permanent national life. We therefore do not distrust the future of essential democracy. The people of this country have not failed in their need. They have registered a mandate that they want to be direct, vigorous action. And the government is doing just that. They've asked for discipline and direction under Philip's leadership. They have therefore made Philip Joseph Pierre the present instrument of our wishes. Therefore, I want to say at this juncture, may the Almighty protect and watch every one of you, my countrymen and women. May the Holy Spirit guide Philip Joseph Pierre's administration in the days and months to come. Listeners of Moving Forward, the leader of the opposition seems to be a perpetrator of lies and likes to spread words of nullification and vilification. And we have witnessed this in terms of the government's move to build the halls of justice in the center of the city. It is unbelievable that the last government intended to build the halls next to the police headquarters. And that is why an individual's father helped in the demolition of the old prison by using their bulldozers. The question is why? The prison was one of St. Lucia's oldest buildings, which in itself had significance, a significant value as far as tourism is concerned and as a tourist site. But they did not think of that at all. They were concerned about themselves and with knocking things down. This was done as expressed by the Prime Minister in the House, that they had no plans put forth to the DCA in building a halls of justice. It was just talk. This shows you the mismanagement that went on in the last government's ambit. They had no plans to build a hall of justice, and the renderings cost for this government, which they found on coming into office, was $1 million. Was this ex-Prime Minister, what this ex-Prime Minister would want us not to know is that the rental payments that the government of St. Lucia is paying in rent on his father's premises, and that was signed, sealed, and delivered for many years. Hence the rush to demolish the prison and the police buildings. Oh yes, this whole development policy for St. Lucia had to include family, friends, and foreigners. The leader of the opposition, when he was Prime Minister, borrowed money for the airport, as alleged, in the House, at 13% interest. Maybe for 5 years, and then it would have been 5% interest fee. But you had an 8% transaction cost. That would have gone on for a few years. This is simply unheard of. More so during that period. This was a clear case of mismanagement when a PPP for the airport was in place. But he abandoned this. Just like the Grosile to Vieux-Fort back road, which would have been funded by the QATs. They don't trust us anymore. They stopped that completely. So much so, the QATs felt sickened by that action. No wonder the people rejected him. And this is now like a thorn in his side. And he's prepared to do anything and everything in his power, together with that of his bother boys, to make life as unpleasant for the government as possible. But I say to this narcissist that you will not be successful because the people now have your measure. Alan, you can jump high. You can jump low. You will never be Prime Minister of this country again. Once again, put this in your pipe and smoke it. Make sure you smoke it. Anyway, I say this in all sincerity, that when this individual speak, I see nothing of him that is St. Lucian. And I'm sure the Prime Minister and many others think likewise. What Alan and his poodles seem not to understand is that they were literally kicked out of office. Alan further failed to realize that the DSH project was a dismal failure. He has failed to apologize to the people of St. Lucia for the accommodation he had at people's expense when he stayed in a London hotel. Ladies and gentlemen, think about it. At £2,000 a night. Can that be right? When the government has to pay for this? This is an individual who has no morals or values. So much so, his father told me personally that he was a spendthrift. Once again, here's a guy who came to Taiwan in 2016. I was there then, unofficially. Not invited. Yet he was accommodated at one of the best hotels. I'm speaking from facts because he did ask to meet me while I was on my second fellowship. He also had Sarah to meet him in Taiwan. Here's the guy, as I've mentioned, who did not seem to understand that you cannot go to another person's country and be expected to be received with open arms because you are the leader of a country. It shows you the mentality of the individual, because when he came back, he spoke, and I was told, as alleged, he spoke of the shoddy treatment he was given to his cabinet. What a pathetic creature. A man with no feelings or respect for any country's rules and regulations. What we are hearing from the United Records of the Poor, more so their leader, are what can be termed as pettiness, excuses, acrobatics to cover their backside due to their destructive behaviors when they were in government. What they seem aggrieved about is what Philip Joseph Pierre is, that he is consistently fair, open-minded, and consistent in the way he manages the economy. And there is not a tinge of one's mind of mismanagement. Whereas when Allen was Prime Minister, other leaders saw him as a blight and realized that he could not manage himself, more so a country, even as small as St. Lucia. Allen, I want you to prove to me that I'm wrong. Here is the ex-Prime Minister, on coming into office, stopped all the projects that was put in place by the previous government. Like a nincompoop, he did not take into account as to how long it would take to finish these projects, that is, if it was useful to the country as a whole. Not only that, but how much money had been spent on the particular project. And lo and behold, a few years later, as we saw this with the St. Jude Hospital building, the cost of millions were just thrown out with 2 buildings being destroyed. Oh yes, this was the mismanagement that was part and parcel of Allen's bigotry. The ex-leader and Prime Minister then of his party, when he was just, if we remember, when he was just a minister, made it clear that when Labour left office in 2016, St. Jude should have been completed, and I'm talking about Stephenson King, by his then government. However, they had the plans to make it look as if the construction for the old St. Jude, as they called it, the old St. Jude, was inadequate. And therefore, they had to build a modern box hospital that will cost millions, which on leaving office was not even 30% completed. That was said by the Prime Minister in the House at the last sitting. Yet, it had cost an arm and a leg. Where did the money go? This money. Was there alleged corruption going on then? Why did they halt the PPP for the airport? Is it because they could not make any money from it, as alleged? What amazed me is that the countries around the world, as far as airport buildings are concerned, do go into a PPP deal, except St. Vincent, who had the Taiwanese that fully funded their airport. When Philip came into office, he gave a brief outline of some aspects of what the country needed and what he was going to do along those lines. That foreshadowed by his campaign addresses. He strongly hinted at a huge public works program in order to relieve depression and give employment. He advocated a redistribution of wealth of the population, raising the minimum wage and also that of pensioners, and to make sure that those over 80 were looked after with allowances and medical treatment free. We saw the promise of economic adjustments. As I said before, the promised jetty in Miracle North, which was a priority, that was accomplished. But the opposition leader, as I said before, had the guts to say that ministers were going to open a toilet. Can you imagine that? This is the nature and insults that this man has espoused, which should be coming out, it seems, out of his backside instead of his mouth. When he left office, having told us that the country was broke or did not have money, he simply did not care whether he had dampened the voters' attitude to his party, because as far as I am concerned, or as far as I can see, he just did not seem to acknowledge the crisis that the country was going through during his term of office, because he was only interested in family, friends, and foreigners. Philip is trying his best in putting our own national house in order and making income balance so that it can balance out. Philip see our international trade relations, though vastly important at the time, is necessary, but he sees it as secondary to the establishment of a sound national economy. Therefore, his policy as the Prime Minister of St. Lucia is in putting first things first. Therefore, he was convinced that we have to put our house in order and to make it a priority. And don't forget the amount of money we had to pay in bills that the last government left behind. Allen never thought that way, because all he wanted was to travel and make a name for himself, not for St. Lucia. Instead, what he did was to destroy the reputation of St. Lucia, because other countries saw him as a joke and therefore thought the people who elected him were morons, maybe. That did not cross his mind because he had that inflated ego. Philip, in my view, inculcated in his mind, if we were to succeed worldwide, that we have to have a policy of the good neighbor, the neighbor who resolutely respects himself, and because he does so, respects the rights of others, the neighbor who respects his obligations and respects the sanctity of his agreements in and with a world of neighbors. Allen was about exploiting the rest of the world if he could. Why? Because of his narcissism. And this can be seen by some of his apostles, One said in Creole, if he has to do crime, he will do it himself, because he would not want any other person to do it for him. He also went on to tell the Labour opposition then, when he was part of the government, in Creole, oh, you are crying? I can tell you that you will have a lot of crying to do. Can anyone believe such a nincompoop to be speaking to other House representatives chosen by the people in that manner? The leader of the United Records of the Poor at one time clearly said that I don't listen. I just let the jackasses bray. Tell me that was wrong too. This is clearly recorded. And when other countries hear that, is the way a leader thinks of his people. Therefore, what these leaders will think of us. When we talk of conflict of interest, I am interested as to who was the lawyer for Ojo Labs and Maloney. This is the individual whom we gave $7.3 million, or we didn't give. He took that and signed for it, for vaccines we never received. When in truth and in fact, this individual had never dealt, that's Maloney and them, in buying or ordering drugs. When we talk of corruption, can we not say that this was the heights of corruption? When the past Prime Minister says that he only knew the person and had never dealt with him. Mate. What a pathetic, feeble excuse, because it simply conveys to me that he thinks we are jackasses that continually bray. I will be back. I'll take a break now. Welcome back to Moving Forward. And as I now come to the last segment, I want to point out what took place or what was said when the leader of the opposition appealed to the nation when, on GIS that is, he addressed the Prime Minister and country. He began by saying, Prime Minister, over the last few months, several deeply alarming revelations have come to light about the manner in which the affairs of our country are being conducted. I have shared with you, as the opposition leader and the general public, my concern about the GPH agreement, the Halls of Justice project, the guarantee of 80 million for the National Lottery Authority loans, the decision to spend an additional spending of 265 million on the old St. Jude Hospital, and the staggering amount of debt, that which you are saddling our country. I'm also at a loss as to your apparently inability to see the urgent need to implement policies to tackle the impacts of inflation and crime problem, which continue unabated. Within this part of the program, I want to ask the ex-Prime Minister a few questions on law and order, which deals with crime. When in office, how many police recruits did you bring in? And I'm not talking about COVID-19, because you brought in special police who were 99.5% UWPs. How many buildings you built for the police? How many CCTV cameras did you bring to the country for surveillance? Did any facilities for your refresher training for the police brought in during your time? There is so much money, there is so much more I would like to ask. But not at this present moment. In truth and in fact, unemployed. The DPP made that clear. Did you know of what impact said yourself? In my view, during your stint as the Prime Minister, you showed a callousness and brutality in the way you can run the country. The poor got poorer, and I would not want you to forget the Fortuna Doctrine, which showed your callousness as a leader because you supported that doctrine. Let me remind you that in coming into office, you put 1.50, that is $1.50, as gas tax on the people of St. Lucia. What was that for? Was that for roads? Because it was never explained fully, and no one ever saw the benefits. Maybe, just maybe, you and your poodles benefited. More so, those who dye their hair because they're afraid of looking old. In 2021, you borrowed $533 million. Yet in the last budget, this government had a debt of $307 million, which in theory, and truth and in fact, they only borrowed $140 million because part of what was left behind, it is part of that amount of 300 odd million. The money you borrowed for the airport, which you stood on a point of order, as I mentioned before, was at 13% interest, 5% interest on the loan, and 13% transaction cost, which runs into, until the work is completed. Therefore, that period until the work is completed would cost us 13%. And that has to be paid out. Just think of it, that a PPP, which was in place when you came into office was simply abundant. Alan, work that out yourself. You know, you're supposed to have a brain. Work it out. So before closing tonight, I want to appeal to you, ladies and gentlemen of St. Lucia, that there are many ways in which we can help to build a new St. Lucia. However, it cannot be built by merely talking about it. We must act. We must act quickly. And finally, in our progress towards the government resumption of work, we require, in my view, two safeguards against a return of the evils of the old order. We hear them in the streets, in the towns, in the constituencies, trying their best, like barking dogs, to scare the people of the country. They have even gone to an extent to speak of war, which shows you the quality of their leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you this. If I read the temper of our people correctly, we have come to the realization, as have never been realized before, that our independence or interdependence on each other, that we can not merely take, but we must live as well. And if we are to go forward, Philip and his government cannot do all. Therefore, we must move as a trained and loyal army, willing to sacrifice for the good of a common discipline, because without such discipline, no progress can be made. No leadership becomes effective, and that is why you see the reprobates in our midst who call themselves United Pack or the United Wreckers of the Poor, and who are trying their very best to unsettle the smoothness that is now the hallmark of the Philip Joseph Pierre's administration. They seem besotted by the pace that development is taking place from the doldrums that existed between 216 and 221. They're simply aghast to see the progress that is taking place all over the country. And this is getting to turn with all their might to blacken St. Lucia's name with CIP or CBI, to the extent that they've brought in their overseas bother boy, Martinez, to use all his maneuvering skills to blacken the name of St. Lucia, because the St. Lucian government paid him no heed. He's now a villain of the St. Kitts government. So he's looking for another spot to rest his weary head, to continue scamming. The past Prime Minister said that he has never met the individual. Okay, I believe him. Who have been imprisoned twice and who will stoop at any level to make a buck. He also introduced us to an individual, remember, Jack Lamb, who he introduced while he was talking about the sport of kings to St. Lucian public, only to find out that this individual was a money launderer, a big one too. Did he know that? There was a big hullabaloo with Galaxy, and that it was alleged that money laundering was taking place in that company in St. Kitts. It seems as it was alleged. It seems as if there are lots of things that Alan seemed to conveniently forget and is prepared to lie that he knows nothing about. What is brought to the fore because of his lies and dishonesty. Yes, these are the types of people they depend on to do their dirty work. But I tell them this, there is a good God who is not evil in his heart. And he is looking after Philip Joseph Pierre. So do all the best you can, because all you will get is simply, "Get thee behind me, Satan." So tonight, I simply say to Alan and his barking dogs, or jackasses as he calls them, that there must be recognition of that falsity of material wealth that they seek when they were in power. Because to them, it is the standard of success, because it goes hand in hand with the abandonment of the false belief that public office and high political positions are being valued only by the standard or pride of place and personal profit. And there must be an end to this. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I close, I want to say to you once again that there's small wonder that the confidence of people needed under the last government seemed to languish, because Alan's followers did not realize that it is only honesty, honor, and the sacredness of obligations, of faithful protection, of unselfish performance that this country will develop, because without them we cannot live, because our survival depends on truth, honesty, and it must be forever on the throne. The last government did not know that, but they were so short-sighted by wealth and position. They used that country's asset, the assets of the people, as cannon fodder for their own gains. Once again, I say to you tonight, ladies and gentlemen, that we should be always proud of ourselves. Work hard together. We must cooperate, because that is very important. And I never want to forget that during the period that was, no peace in the land because of the unfair and unjust government. I want to say to you all that I was simply flabbergasted when I heard the spider's web making a pronouncement that was so stupid in terms of two Calypsonians who, in his view, should be singing against the government and not for the government. The question I now put to that idiot, who has already built up a reputation for idiosyncrasies, because he does not seem to know what calypso is all about. So if government is doing a damn good job, as Philip is now doing, they have to ignore this and, blast them on every little nook and cranny. Well. These United Records of the Poor are worse than I thought. This is so pathetic. So, ladies and gentlemen, having said all of this, I want to say to you tonight to always never forget that you were born black, and you should be proud of that. And always remember that St. Lucia is our home. Therefore, go in peace to serve the one Most High every second, minute, or hour of the day. Blessed love to you all. Good night and good night. Go in peace, and goodbye and goodbye.